Thank you guys and welcome. Welcome to another edition of the No Job Podcast, where we believe that everybody has to earn a living, but nobody has to have a job. We are people that love to work when the work is meaningful to us, when it brings us joy, when our energy is in alignment with our passion and what's important to us. I've got today with me a guest by the name of Chris Holder. Let me tell you the story of how I met Chris. So, I met Chris at a church event, and a church event is not where you expect guys to pull up in a Maserati, but it's exactly where Chris pulled up in his Maserati. And as fate would have it, I kid you not, this was the exact Maserati I had been looking at on the computer the night before. I'm not even a huge car guy. So I like a nice car as much as the next guy, but I'm not a buff the way Chris is. But I just took that as a sign that today I met a guy who has the car that I was looking at last night, a car that you don't see every day. He is a serial entrepreneur. Chris Holder is a man on a $1 million run or a run to 1 million. He's going to explain to you exactly what that means in a second. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to you Chris Holder. How's it going, man?
I'm good, man. So glad to be here and share a little bit. I didn't even know, man. I didn't
Yeah.
know that was the car. I wasn't even gonna drive that car there that day.
Uh-huh.
That's the funny part. I was like, what car should I take that's safe to drive in Brooklyn?
Yeah. Yeah.
I always look at what's a New York car versus a car somewhere else. But no, for sure, man. Just glad to be here to share some value, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're someone who I think we can get a lot of value from, not just because of the fact that you drive an expensive car or expensive cars, but because I've paid attention to your social media, even the way you spoke at that church event. And to my ear and to my eye, you seem like somebody who's been paying attention in the school of life and who's
Mhm.
gathered a little bit of wisdom that I hope you
Yeah,
can share with us today.
for
And
sure.
I like to open these conversations with the question. I ask this question often, so tell me what you think. The question is, when is the first time you remember earning money and what did you spend that money on?
Oh, that one's this is funny. I might have been five.
Mhm.
My father super early, he he wanted to train us because it was four of us, and my dad would have a schedule, a chart schedule based on the chores in the house, and we would all chase the chores that had the most money. Now we didn't really understand money yet, but we understood that the top chores gave us enough of this piece of paper that when we went to go shopping, we could get more stuff.
Right, right.
So my dad every week, as we would save up, he would ask us, "What do you want?" And I told him that at the time, I had wanted it was a GI Joe set. And the reason I'll never forget it was like the biggest GI Joe set ever. They might have had like 100 little GI Joe pieces in it,
Right. Yeah.
and that was like a life changing moment for me. That's like the most toys I've ever had.
Yeah.
And my dad said, okay, if you complete this chore enough times, you'll get that. So I would just continue to put his money in my bank, and then my dad, the day that I had enough, my dad explained to me, he says, now when you buy this, all of this money that you have here is going to be gone for
Mhm.
this toy. He goes, do you want to have this empty? And that was the first time I was like, I couldn't really register, but just looking at him, I was like, I probably shouldn't have it empty. So I told my dad, well, can I wait till I double what's in here? This is five.
Yeah. Right.
I'll never and I remember it vividly because me and my dad used to talk about that, obviously over the years, right? Like that was my dad's story. Like I knew he was gonna be good with money from like when he was young. Um, and yeah, so my dad said, well, now you have enough that if you go and we buy it, we'll do. So when we went there, my dad ended up buying it for me,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because he said that, you're a good steward of your money. So I
Mhm.
want to encourage you. So this is a gift for being good, for actually
Right.
making the right decision.
Mhm.
So I didn't actually spend it. I didn't spend my money on it. My dad did it for me. So that in a way, I mean, that's the story because I was ready to buy it.
Yeah.
And then my dad didn't buy it. He took the money and he says, no, I'm going to buy it for my son. And that was it. So I put the money down. I was there in the shop and
Yeah.
everything. Like, So that would be
That's
my
great.
GI Joe set, my GI Joe with a million mini GI Joe pieces in it. That was what I purchased.
Cool. That's awesome. That's a great story. Not only because you got the dope GI Joe set, but because your dad was teaching
Yeah,
stewardship principles to you from at least the age of 5, and that's
yeah,
something I know and you know a lot of people can't say.
correct,
That's extraordinary, and I imagine that's had a big influence in the way you viewed money. Not only the way you viewed money, but the way you viewed earning money. The
correct.
fact that there was a chart which had different tiers of chores that were paid different amounts, and that you and your siblings knew you had to chase the bigger chores if you wanted the bigger money. You knew
Yep,
you couldn't do the bottom chores if you wanted the bigger money. Most people don't graduate high school with that with
yeah,
that knowledge, and you
yep.
were being taught it at 5. So that's awesome. So in short, tell us what you do these days, Chris. What are you up to? What do you do for a living?
So I am a serial entrepreneur, but mostly more of a serial CEO. So I kind of started veering away from the like serial entrepreneur. It's like I'm running some very successful companies that take up a lot of my time. So I pretty much run or am running um, companies in a few different spaces. So if I could run them down, so we have the 6 and 7 figure coaching program that we run, which is under the $100 million run. So that's the what you'll see. You'll see a lot of my stuff is $100 million run, and that run was put together for me. I'm my plan is to help 1,000 people make their first 6 or 7 figure income
Hmm.
from any business, any concept.
Right.
And if I can hit that number together, we would amass at least $100 million, or what I like to call growth revenue. Right. So
Okay.
everybody at 100,000 or more, we'd reach that number. Once that happens, we would then be able to self suffice anything we want. We'd be able to, anyone can come to the table and say, hey, I'm looking to raise capital for this. Well, there's a community that you've been working with, that you've been a part of, that you can come back to.
Right.
Hey, I want to go make a change in this part of the world that doesn't have water, and we need money to go to this part of the world.
Mhm.
And okay, great. We can pool money together from this community. So it's a bigger mission than just money, but
Right.
recognizing the importance of having enough money to do what you want, and the importance of community. Right.
Right.
Too long have we been everyone doing things by themselves. And my concept was, well, if I got the right group of people together, how much more powerful could we be? How much
Sure.
more support could we have for each other? Because that's not something that I see on a consistent basis.
Right.
So yeah, so that's the $100 million run. That's where the CEO Chris Holder brand kind of not starts, but that's the bigger part of my day where we coach people to make that type of income. So that's that business.
Hmm.
We run a real estate company that handles credit and credit, the loan process and the purchasing process. We do all things real estate, flipping homes, saving people's homes from foreclosures, things of that nature. So
Right.
we are in the real estate space as well. We have People 360, which is our relationship company. So the goal is to bring down the divorce rate by honestly stopping relationships that shouldn't go down the aisle. So if we could,
Mm.
how do you bring the best way to bring the divorce rate down is to stop it before it gets there,
Right.
right? So our
Yeah.
goal is to connect with people in all phases of that process to help them through that and give them tools that they didn't have. You have, someone who may be from Nigeria marrying someone that's from India, and just because they're in the United States, they get to meet and
Mhm.
actually fall in love and get married, but their dynamics, their social, their spirituals, there's a lot of dynamics that, yes, love is great, and yes, having money is good, but those other dramatic changes and beliefs
Yeah.
you need help with. So we're able to come in, help those people navigate through that terrain that honestly there is no real guidance in that area.
Hmm.
Singles, helping them fix their own hurt, so that they're
Hmm.
not going and hurting people, because that concept of hurt people.
Right.
So that's that company. So the best way to bring down the divorce rates is to do that. So we've been doing that. We launched it beta test last year. We're still in beta now, but we have built the community. It is up and running, and I've been doing pretty well. Rejuvenetics, which is my health and fitness direct sales company. It's international. We provide health and fitness products for individuals all over the world, where we also white label. So
Right.
someone can come up with an idea, we'll white label it, send that out. And that company has been up and running for 7 years.
Hmm.
So we have CEO Exotics, where we rent out my one of my exotic cars for primarily videos, photo shoots, and movies. Those are the only three categories that I'll use my car. So it's not something where someone can just rent the car
Right.
to drive it. But if someone wanted to rent a car to drive, I do have access to an exotic car rental company that I've done partnerships with, that I would just send the business directly to them. So we do still provide that service. But if they want one of my cars, ain't nobody driving my car but me,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and I can continue. We're in 3D company. We're in a 3D company, so we deal with we're in the tech space as well, figurine space, jewelry space. If I sit here and go down, so we're in about
Yeah.
10 different companies,
Okay.
great teams of people. That's why they're able to be super successful
Right.
as well. So it's not just one man. It's not a one
Sure.
man show.
Sure. So let me ask you, obviously, it takes a lot of good people to run successful businesses
Correct.
in those industries. And you talked about the $100 million run, helping a
Yep.
thousand people to get their first six or seven um, income salaries, or not salaries, but
Yep.
earnings in a
Yep.
year. My question to
Hmm.
you is, how are you picking those thousand people? How are you picking the people that work in your businesses? What qualities
Yeah.
do you look for in people that let you know they can be a part of something spectacular and successful and really contribute? Because that's what the listeners, that's what we have to have within
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah. Coachability. That's it.
Hmm.
I after everything that I've been through, first I thought it was talent,
Hmm.
right? I thought, okay, this person's just naturally gifted at this. They're gonna make a lot of money. They're gonna be, yeah, but then they're also destructive. They'll destroy themselves in the process.
Right.
So talent alone
Hmm.
wasn't it. I thought, someone being unique,
Hmm.
right? So they had a unique mind or a unique ability, or yeah, but then it comes back to work. Then it
Yeah.
comes back to, are they, so I can run down a list of things that I saw. So I recognize that a lot of the people that end up helping are some of the people that most people would walk, not would look over,
Hmm.
right? Because they have all the intangibles except for the confidence.
Mm.
Because they had everything else. They have the idea, they have the this, they have the that, but they're shy,
Hmm.
or they came from a broken home or whatever. Their family beat them down enough that they said it's not a good idea.
Right.
And then I meet them and I just put the battery in their back,
Hmm.
right? And then I tell them to send all that negative to me,
Hmm.
like, you send them my way, right? And
Hmm.
let me handle that. So I kind of become a shield for some of them, where they
Yeah.
then get to go, nah, I'm not really going to listen to you anymore because Chris told me you were going to say that. It's
Right.
like, well, who's Chris? I'm like, let's get on the phone. Get him on the phone with me. Let's talk. Let me talk to him for you.
Yeah.
And just being the support system that a lot of them didn't know, because everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, let's just say, right?
Hmm.
Freedom and all that other stuff. Nobody knows what it really takes to be a successful entrepreneur, right? And a lot of it is because there's not enough examples in most people's lives for them to say, like, that's the person that I'm gonna follow.
Hmm.
So coachability and being able to kind of jump in where they don't recognize, like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this, and then be there with them. So
Right.
I would say coachability, because all the other stuff is mechanics.
Sure. Right. So what I'm extrapolating from that for our audience basically is, on our side of the equation, we need to have a mentor, and mentors need to have somebody who's coachable. So
Yep.
I'm thinking we need to transform ourselves into the most coachable people we can possibly be,
Hmm.
and listen to what our mentors are telling us to give ourselves the greatest probability of success. Because, like you said, if everybody knew what it took to be the entrepreneur they wanted to be, they'd already be it,
Already be
right?
there.
They would absolutely already be there. That's some great insight. So just to backtrack a little, running a ton of businesses, a lot of great
Yep.
people, prosperous, successful. Where did it all start? When was the first time you were like, I want to run this business, I want to run that business? How'd that come to pass?
Um, so just business in general. My father was an entrepreneur, so I grew up seeing it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I knew that, but I knew through seeing it what I didn't want
Okay. Talk
too.
about that.
So my father ran, so I'm Guyanese. That's my nationality. So I grew up in Guyana. We grew up as one of the wealthiest families in Guyana,
Okay.
right? Now, you in retrospect to the US, it's a joke. You get what I'm saying? It's a
Yeah.
third world country. You know, if you got a decent enough job, you're part of the wealthy people, right?
Got it.
Um, but we live right next door to the president of the country. So we were also on that row, if you want to call it whatever. So we grew up being able to see a combination of everything. And my father running multiple business in the country. My mother was a banker. So I learned about numbers and money looking at my mother's job, right? So my parents, if you want to say, I was in the perfect combination in a household for business. That's how I looked at it.
Sure.
But my dad, he spent so much time working that he wasn't able to spend as much time with us, right? All the kids, because he's working, he's running all these companies, he is making sure we have everything we need, everything you want, except for as a kid, you just want to hang out,
Right.
right? You
Yeah.
just kind of want your dad there,
Of
right?
course.
So I then looked at the other side, my mother who worked in banking. She also wasn't home a lot during the day, right? The typical 9 to 5, so on and so forth. So we had nannies. So we spent more time with our nannies than our parents during the day,
Right.
right? So then I said, okay, is there a middle ground? So I grew up saying, well, I don't want to work for somebody else because I understood that concept early. I didn't like how people spoke to people when they felt like they had a position of authority over them.
Right.
So that emotionally triggered me early because I grew up with everyone telling me what I could and couldn't do, and it bothered me. So I said, okay, so I need to be in my own thing. But then I also said I didn't want to be so busy that I wasn't able to hang out.
Sure.
I wasn't able to be present.
Right.
So from a very early age, like I said, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to be a business owner. I'm going to figure it out because this is how I'm going to be successful fast
Mm.
and get all the money I need and everything like that. But I said, but I gotta be in a position as I started aging, I recognized that I needed to find a way to do it fast so that when I had kids, I could be present. That was literally it. So I said, okay, I gotta do this fast. So that's why I started so early. And I failed early for a bunch of years. I just failed at everything I did. But I tried everything, right?
Hmm.
So I got my cuts and bruises from jumping into the pit and then crawling back up the mountain.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that was easy for me. So when I see someone going through something, I'm like, oh no, I've been there. Oh, no, and I've fallen so many times that I almost expected to fall, but then I would jump up faster, right?
Sure.
So it's a little different, as you're building. So for me, that was what was important. So I was able to see it early
Hmm.
that I wanted that. And if I were to say my first official business that I started with my friends, I was around 12, 13, right?
Okay.
We sold, they used to be quarter water juices. They used to sell in the corner
Yeah.
store.
Yep. I know.
We used to take those. We used to make Kool-Aid. We would fill them back up and we'd go to baseball games. Because we didn't play baseball. We go to areas where people play baseball. And for whatever reason, they didn't make Kool-Aid like us, and we would sell out,
Yeah.
and that was our first business. And
Got
that's
it.
when I started understanding profit sharing because I got to split this with 5 people,
Mm-hmm.
and all that work didn't equate. When I got my split, I'm like, that's not really a lot of money,
Right.
right? So I'm
Yeah.
like, either we're getting rid of some people or I need a new business.
Right.
And I decided to start another business, which was a t-shirt business, and this time I only took one partner,
Yep.
right? So it's like I started figuring out
Yeah.
stuff as I went along. So I saw how much time it took, and I just kept becoming more and more afraid because I'm like, I don't see how I'm going to get time. This just
Hmm.
seems like there's so much more time I have to put in. I'm never going to have time. And I started getting discouraged, like maybe being an entrepreneur is not the way to go because I hadn't seen someone who had the time and the money. I
Okay.
just saw all the work and the money, right? So
Right.
yes, they have the lifestyle and all the stuff, but I'm like, hey, they not home.
Right.
And then I was blessed, thank God, to finally meet someone who was living that life. So I saw it was real.
Okay.
And that's what kind of brought me back to like, just keep pushing. You can get there. You started early. Just
Right.
keep failing, failing, failing now. And eventually something's going to hit, but you got
Mhm.
to keep pushing. Don't listen to anybody. And that was my grandmother. She's the one that really showed me. So my grandmother lived a retired life, and I got to see what being retired looked like. And
Hmm.
she continued to tell me, like, you want to get here early. You want
Right.
to get here as soon as you can. So I'm like, that became my driving force. Is I want to live like my grandmother with my dad's bank account. And that's how I
Right.
understood that concept. That's what this is all for. So yeah.
Hmm. So let me ask. I think a lot of people could relate to the fear of not having enough time to spend with their families, and
Mhm.
sort of trading those relationships for building wealth. And the idea of finding a happy medium where you can enjoy something like the best of both is like a dream come true for people. So
Mhm.
tell me, how did you hedge against the loss of time with the family and still run and build successful businesses?
So yeah, so I got married. Well, before I got married, I met my wife, and she met me at the busiest time. And she was very clear. She's like, it's not gonna work. She goes, if this is life, I don't want it. She's like, I would rather. She's like, I don't know. And her thing was, I don't know what I want, but I know that that's not it,
Yeah.
right? She goes, but I want us to work. And I was like, I want us to work too. And I'm like, I don't know. So she goes, I don't know. You're smart. Like, you figure it out. Like, you figure it out. Like, you make this work for us,
That's
right?
real. Yeah.
So I'm like, all right. And then it took me a while, man. I was like literally like every day figuring out. But thank God at the time that I met her, I had already, I'll be honest, I'd already made $1 million, right?
Hmm.
But it wasn't in the way most people, would have made it. So it's not just like it's just right there. It was spread out. I had it all over the place. I was still establishing myself. And it hit me. I said, you know what the problem was? I was building my businesses. Um, I was building my family around my businesses instead of my businesses around my family.
Talk more about that.
So I was more like, this is the schedule. Here's where you guys fit, right? Because I had to be at that meeting. I had to be on that conference call. So you get this anxiety of, if I miss this call, if I miss this deal, this could set us back. So you start to think and take on the mentality, because that's what we're taught, that you have to sacrifice time with your family, that you have to sacrifice birthdays and
Hmm.
holidays and
Hmm.
whatever. And I didn't know any better, because that's what I was taught, right? They say, hey, listen, you got to do this for a period of time, and then you get it all back. That's
Hmm.
what I was sold. But I was smart enough to know that that wasn't true, because I saw what my dad did. I'm like, nah, it don't. This can keep going. Like, this can keep going.
Yeah.
So I decided to say, let me design my life. So I
Hmm.
stopped and I said, the problem is this blueprint that I have in my brain of what life is supposed to look like. And the blueprint that I've been given in all aspects told me that this is how you're supposed to be successful. This is what it looks like. I said, but no one told me that I had control of the blueprint. No one told me that I'm the designer
Hmm.
of this ship. I'm the captain. I'm really in control of this. And if I say this is gonna work, this is how it's gonna work. And I stopped and I said, I spoke with my wife and I said, what will make life look dope for you, for me, for our future kid? Like, what does life look like? And we just sat there and just talked crazy.
Hmm.
We sat there and talked crazy, and we made it work. We said to ourselves, we're going to do a couple things, and we're just going to focus in on those things, and then become non-negotiable
Hmm.
with our schedules. Become non-negotiable. Like, nope, don't care how important it is, they got to adjust to us. Well, they
Hmm.
want you there, they got to adjust to this date. They have to adjust to this time. Nope, this is your cutoff time. It
Hmm.
became so hard because it was the opposite of what I've been taught, right? It
Yeah,
was the
for sure.
opposite of what I've been taught. So I started to design my day. I started to design the week, and I started to design our goals around what we were going to do as a family. And I said, all businesses have to go around this. I remember when my wife said she was pregnant, and I told everybody, you better get whatever it is you're trying to set up for me, somewhere else. Okay. Because once she's born, I'm done.
Right.
Okay. Once she's born, I don't know how y'all gonna do it, but I'm not adding anything new to the table.
Right.
And a lot of people were just like, well, Chris, what about this? Chris, what about that? What about this? What about this? And I'm like, bro, I don't care. I'm
Hmm.
not concerned. I'm gonna be present when she's here. my
Hmm.
schedule is going to be based around her. So
Hmm.
then when my daughters born, I said I had to learn how to work 2 hour days.
Wow.
I said I can only work 2 hours because anyone who got kids, I mean, if you have kids, from the minute they wake up, give or take 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, if you're present, you're pretty much there till it's time for them to go to bed,
Right. Yeah.
right? And then we also decided we're homeschooling our kids. So on top of that, we really with the kids, right?
Yeah.
And then I also have to spend time with my wife. So there's a time I got to go to bed, time I got to spend with my kid, time. So it became this whole thing like, how am I going to pull this off with 2 hours a day?
Hmm.
And I said, you know what? I started really looking at how much was I really doing in the day. And I recognized that I was only being effective 2 hours out of every day. So I started telling people, I tell people, take a look at your full day. I want you to really write down the things you've actually done for the day. Put how much time those things took. And if people are really honest with themselves, they really didn't put in more than 2 hours for the day in
Hmm.
effective business activities, effective money making activities. So a lot of times people don't recognize that they're wasting time and they're not efficient. So I rearranged my whole schedule, and now there's slots and then days where I'm like, okay, this day is a work day. This is one day I'm gonna work the whole day and that's it. The rest of the week, 2 hours, see you when I see you, right? So that was the biggest thing, designing the life you want first and then building the business that's going to support it around that.
Sure. I appreciate that because even the way I phrased my question to you showed I was thinking it the opposite way. I said, how do you, hedge against losing all the time with your family? I was already
Mhm.
assuming the time with the family was going to be lost. But when you flip that on its head and you prioritize, you can live a totally different life. And I understand you've made no bones about it. You have to pay the cost in work to be able to make
Yeah.
those priorities, but obviously it sounds like you found it to be more than worth it. Would that be fair
Yeah.
to? Yeah.
By far, because when you're single, you can do it the other way
Hmm.
because it's just you, right? And I'm not saying we abuse ourselves, but I mean, we wear ourselves out, right? When you add a second person who is not you, right? Who's not necessarily the super entrepreneur or the whatever. There's a learning curve that they have to go through too. And you
Right.
have to factor in their emotions and their feelings and the fact
Hmm.
that they're still thinking like, I just want to watch a movie with you. And you're like, not tonight. I got a conference call. Not tomorrow. I got a Zoom meeting. Not and that person is like, am I important?
Hmm.
Right? And we forget that. And then when you add a child in, it changes again. And you start to, I think people forget that you are responsible for their emotions. You are responsible for them. They are your business.
Right.
They are your biggest investments,
Sure.
right? And that was kind of what the turning point was for me. Was these are the things that I want to build around, no matter what. And
Hmm.
it worked out. And more people who start designing their lives that way, they all like within a week or two tell me, Chris, this is a completely different. I said, I told you, it changes
Yeah.
it's like you literally come back home like you were in a movie and like you went to something and came back and everyone's acting normal and you're like, y'all have no idea what I just saw. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure the title of this episode is going to be Chris Holder Design Your Life because that phrase it's really catchy and that's a really sticky and a really good one and it says exactly what it is. Um a little bit ago in the conversation, you mentioned when you were coming up, when you were
Yeah.
learning business, you fell down pretty hard a few times
Yeah.
and it sucked. What would you say is the farthest you ever fell like and what was that period like?
Yeah. The most people know I fell all the way to being homeless,
Uh-huh.
right? And how that happened. People say, well, how do you got parents? You got this. How do you go homeless? Ruining relationships, right? You think you know everything. You take chances. You hurt people, and those same people are not going to open those doors. When you're in trouble because they're going to be like, so after you did what you did, after you said what you said, I am now supposed to be responsible for you? No. This is my chance to hurt you too. This is my chance to give a point. And that's what happened to me. I made a mistake. I was in my 20s, early 20s. And me and my father, because I thought I was, smarter than him or whatever. And my dad's old school Caribbean, so he wasn't playing that. And he was very, very hurt because of what I did. And he's like, "You got to go." So I was like, "Who cares? I got my own place, whatever." Because I wasn't living at home at the time. I had an apartment. Um, and that day that I did that, when I got to my apartment, which I was living in Staten Island at the time, my roommate, who didn't listen to our landlord, my roommate who smoked all the time, but I would tell him don't smoke in our unit. But privileged, a privileged kid, came from a very wealthy family, so he figured he could do whatever he wanted. And he came from California, so I met him in college. We were on a basketball team, and the woman, she was in her 80s, and she's like, "Hey, I don't like the smell. I don't want the space smell like that." She's like, so I told her I'd make sure I stay on him. So that day he didn't listen, and she spazzed. She lost it, and she's like, "Y'all got to go." And by the time I got back, all our stuff was already outside
Wow.
of the apartment. This 80 something year old woman took as much stuff as she could from our unit and put it on the street and called the police to make sure they knew that. Now, granted, there was, we could say a bunch of stuff like she couldn't kick you out, she can't do this. Let me tell you something about Staten Island, okay?
Yeah.
Staten Island and those police officers, when they saw that old 80 something year old woman and they saw who was giving her the problem and she was going to tell why, we were like, we don't want that problem. So we just left it. So everyone's like, "Chris, she can't kick you out. There's renters rules." And I'm like, yeah, but not when you mess up the way you mess up and you pretend you could be implemented in something that you had nothing to do with, that's more serious. So she said, "Listen, I don't want this to go further. Just leave." And I was like, fine. So now I'm took whatever I could, packed up the car, and living out my car. And I was in my car for about a year and change. A
Wow.
year and change. Yeah, you go from disbelief to it's not going to last longer than a week, right? Someone is going to, right? And then you start really looking at your situation. My girlfriend at the time lived with her parents, right? So there's no space for me there. My parents just kicked me out. I wasn't really close with many aunts or uncles, right? So that wasn't like an option. And then I wasn't going to tell them because I knew my dad was going to call them, like, "Don't take that boy in." Like my dad was not, he, so I'm like, "That's fine. I'll figure it out." But, it was also wintertime. So it's getting cold. So I had to figure it out. And I started creating a system on how I was going to make it through that. I got light. I got rid of stuff that I didn't need. I started, literally rotating stuff. So I started using, you go straight into survival. How am I going to survive here while maintaining the look that everything is okay? You
Hmm.
know, I wasn't able to, the money I was making, I couldn't afford to keep my car insurance on. So my girlfriend at the time, she paid for it. She's like, "Hey, I don't want you out here dressed." So she covered that uh, for that time for me, because she remembered when she was going through what she was going through. I was able to cover her. So some of those relationships did help me not have to go crazy. But I've been in shelters, so I know what that system looks like. All of that, and then as I shared in the interview, I have it on my website. I basically, my turning point during that time was on a rainy day. My car, which was not one of the best cars, I had to turn it on from the outside, right? So
Yeah,
that's a whole
I
nother
get you.
story. And I had touched. It was raining, and me being the genius, I was turning the car on with a live battery with two live wires in the rain, right? And I got an electric shock that froze me and then brought me to my knees, and I couldn't let it go. And I was so thankful that the angle that I was on, just the momentum shifted me over. If not, I don't really know if I would still be here today. At least,
Mhm.
from everything that I've heard, like if you'd have kept that, you probably could have died, right? And while I'm laying on my back, I'm literally looking up in the sky, no lie. And I start laughing to myself. And I'm like, oh, this is rock bottom, right? Like it hit me like this is the bottom because I said to myself, this would be the story of what people said about Chris Holder. If I passed away today, this was going to be your story. This is how you were going to be remembered for the kid that ruined the relationships, was homeless, blah blah blah, and ended up dying because he was smart enough to touch live wires on the battery. You see, and that was when I was like, nah, mm-mm, I got to prove everybody wrong. I'm going to rearrange everything. And I sat there and I designed a life. Like I sat there and said, okay, what are we doing? My dad always used to say to me, what's your 5 year plan? He did that to me starting at five. Like at five, he goes, what's the 5 year plan?
Wow.
So I didn't really know what that meant. But because I was always around my grandmother, I said that I want to be retired. I want to retire like grandma did. I want to retire. When I was 10, I said I want to retire by 25. Like I put a date on it, a time on it. My dad was like, great, you got 20 years to do it. He says you got 20 years. You give yourself a shot, 15 and then 5 bonus years, so that was his whole thing, right? He says you'll get it done, but you got to be relentless. And when I was in the car, I was like, okay, I'm 20. I think at this time I was 20, 22. I was like, okay, I got 3 years. That's all I focused on. Nothing else mattered. I didn't care about after 25. I said, I need to be focused on all activities that within the next 3 years before my 25th birthday, I can be considered financially retired. And that became my conversation. I started reading books. I started changing the way I looked at the week. I started change, and it's so crazy when we make the decision to change how everything else stops.
Hmm.
Nothing else matters. So that was the turning point and the decision making process. That from there I just started going super hard in all things that meant I could make, because in my brain at the time I needed to make six figures because I didn't understand. I mean, a lot of money, but I'm like, if I can make $100,000, I was like, I'm a millionaire. Like that's my brain because I didn't make that type of money. So I said I needed to find stuff that allowed me to make that type of money without graduating college because I wasn't done with school yet. So I was like, I need to do it, and that's what took me into the industries that I ended up in.
Okay, absolutely. Man, I just want to thank you. I appreciate your time and I appreciate the gems that you drop. Very valuable to the community here at the No Job Podcast. And if someone's at their turning point, right? If someone's at a position, they're in a position in life where they know they've got to make a change or it's all going to go down in a way that they consider a nightmare that they never
Mm-hmm.
want to see. One, what would you say to them? And two, where can they find you? Maybe they can see if they can be part of that $100 million
Right.
run.
So the first thing I would do is I would only at this point, if they're at that point, I would only at this point listen to someone who is living visually the life that they want. I would stop everything. I would stop literally looking at it. It doesn't matter who it is. If the person isn't driving what you want, living where you want, have the relationship that you want, even if it's a relationship with God, I mean, you have to determine who is going to guide me out of this because that person is in a situation where they need a response today. They need to get on the phone with somebody today, and that person needs to instill confidence that if they listen to what the hell they're telling them, this whole situation will be gone, and then they will reach the plateau they can never, because you need that. So they're going to be finding, if you want to call it your mentor, your, so look at what was important for me. That was important because that's something my parents always told me. Never take advice from someone who's not where you want to be in life, because the worst thing they can do and the best thing they can do is get you to as far as they've gotten. So that would be my initial message. I could give them a whole bunch, but if you're really at that point, you got to make a move. I didn't know the industries I was going to get into. But what
Hmm.
I did know is that if I at least followed the people who are living the lifestyles and enjoying what it is I've been looking for, then at least I know that all of the conversations I'm having is coming from something they're seeing every day.
Yes,
So
makes perfect
that
sense.
was the biggest thing. And a lot of times those mentors may not even be someone that they get to physically meet. It might be someone that they like the first person that I, if you want to say mentor, whatever, I never met him at that point was Robert Kiyosaki, right? Because I sat in the car and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And yeah, that book was cool, But Cash Flow Quadrant, which is the follow-up book that he wrote to that, was the game changer for me. That was really when things started to turn. And then that followed up by me starting to follow Tony Robbins. And I started following everything he did all the way up to today. Like I'm very, like I saw him being someone that's still growing no matter what. So I'm like, these are the people, the man. And I looked at how much they love their wives. I looked at how much they, I looked at their lives. Let me just say that. Let me not get into that. I said, okay, these are men that I could look at that are not just financially well, but there's a part of them that's like from a spiritual standpoint. I don't want to get too into that. You could
Yes.
pick up on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I said, these are the things that I've been, and I'm going to listen to what these men have to say and then take from what they have to say and put my twist on it that fits me,
Hmm.
right? Because not everything they said really fit me and the opportunities that I was going to get, right?
Sure.
Because I was also realistic with myself.
Right.
So yeah, so that would be right out the gate. I wouldn't listen to anybody. Like for me, it was cars, home, like everything. Like all I had my own list, and I said, I do not care. If you don't
Hmm.
have all of them, I will continue to look until I found it. So that would be that. And if someone wanted to find me, they could go to ceochrisholder.com, and then they can reach out to me directly from the website. They could Google me, everything, all my handles, Google, YouTube, you name it, everything is CEO Chris Holder.
All right. Awesome, man. I'm sure people will reach out to you. Again, Chris, thanks so much. We appreciate your wisdom. God bless. And we hope to see you on the show again. Have a great
For
night, man.
sure, man. Love to be.
All right.